This is part 2 of the Globalization video series. This is going to be a short video applying some of the concepts that we discussed in the last video to the UK. So let's look at some of the positive effects of globalization on the UK economy. So we said towards the end of the last video that economies can benefit from globalization in sectors where they have a comparative advantage. For sectors such as financial services, aerospace and pharmaceuticals, this is the case. The UK has a comparative advantage in these sectors. Therefore, workers and firms in these sectors will have benefited from globalization. We also mentioned how globalization features increased freedom of movement of people to work and live in different countries. With regards to the UK, inward migration of skilled labour has benefited the UK economy. Just taking the NHS as an example, EU workers make up around 10.9% of all NHS staff. And so you can see how not only the increased integration of the world's economies, but also the world's people has benefited the UK economy. And lastly, reduced costs of production for firms. Globalization has allowed UK businesses to outsource certain tasks such as sales, marketing and customer service overseas to countries such as India, China and the Philippines, countries where wages, in other words the cost of labour and the strength of labour regulations are much lower. This has allowed UK businesses to reduce their costs of production, making them more competitive in global markets. Obviously this has been beneficial for the UK's economic growth. Interdependence can be both a good thing and a bad thing. But when we're looking at COVID-19 and the 2008 financial crisis, interdependence has definitely been bad for the UK economy. In both these cases, events have taken place in different countries, China with COVID-19 and the US with the 2008 financial crisis. If we look at the 2008 financial crisis, the housing bubble, followed by the freezing up of the American banking system, followed by the recession, all those three things had immense impacts on the UK economy, causing the UK economy, alongside many others worldwide, to fall into recession. And now with COVID-19, even if the virus didn't spread to the UK, if we assume that the virus stayed contained in China, there still would have been an enormous impact on the UK economy. This is because, as we explained earlier, with outsourcing, UK businesses have outsourced a lot of their production to China because costs of production are much lower in China where wages are lower. The severing of supply chains with China and subsequently with Europe, with America, with countries worldwide has led to the UK having to suffer tremendous falls in production levels and tremendous falls in GDP. Next, let's think about structural unemployment from the UK's point of view. There are certain sectors declining in the UK due to overbearing foreign competition, for example UK steel. This has been very bad for workers working in these affected sectors, as globalization has made it more and more inevitable that these sectors will continue to decline. This will lead to a large increase in structural unemployment from these sectors, meaning that many people will have to look for jobs elsewhere. And lastly, inequality. Globalization will have differing impacts on different people in the UK economy depending on who they are. For example, let's take the CEOs of multinational corporations. They will benefit from globalization. This is because MNCs are able to reduce costs of production and increase profit levels by outsourcing work abroad. But we were just talking about how the displacement of jobs due to this offshoring and due to foreign competition can leave many people unemployed. These two things happening at the same time increases the gap between the poorest and the richest in the UK economy. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, which applied practical examples to some of the arguments made in the previous video on the positives and negatives of globalization. Here is the accompanying news article for this video, titled "The End of Globalization, the Herculean Task of Decoupling Supply Chains from China." Thank you very much for listening.